everyone, my name is Sarah. I'm 25 years old, and I have a super strong memory. I can learn any language in the world in just one evening. But I wasn't born like that. In fact, in my earlier days, I could hardly remember 10 new words in a week. Here's my amazing story. Throughout all of my life, I had a big problem with my memory. I always had to put a really big effort to do my classes. I just couldn't remember new things. For example, learning a new poem was a disastrous effort for me. Even a small rhyme to learn took all of my possible effort. I had a very special condition, ADHD, attention deficit. This is a special medical condition when it takes a person several days to learn basic information that would take an ordinary person just a couple of hours. I also had many other accompanying problems with comprehending complex scientific theories, and I just literally could not remember any mathematical formulas and equations. It all got even worse when I started learning foreign languages. Can you imagine the effort I had to put into that? I couldn't remember things even in my native language. I was trying to learn French and Spanish, and it was really hard. But I took my worst experience when learning Chinese. Chinese hieroglyphs just drove me crazy. My parents hired a tutor for me, but it didn't help. I was getting so much stress that I even got nightmares when these monster hieroglyphs were chasing and torturing me. I would wake up in the middle of the night and scream out loud, "Ni hao!" But time went on and I got used to all of this. I graduated from school and I promised myself that I would never learn any more foreign languages in my life. I got into college and things got easier for me as I chose arts as my major. I had a great talent for drawing since my childhood. So my paradox was that I had both, a bad memory and a great creativity. I had a great time in college, but when I graduated, it got difficult again. I couldn't sell my paintings, nobody wanted to buy them, and I was just an unknown artist. So I had to look for some work in the office to support myself. I applied for several jobs and was invited for interviews. However, I failed them all as I was making mistakes. I lacked energy and was absent-minded. I was getting nervous that I wouldn't find a job, but finally, one of my later interviews was quite good, and I was hired as a secretary in a business company. I think the main reason they hired me was my knowledge of Chinese language that I had in my resume. My professional career became an everyday nightmare for me as I had a very bad memory and I was just forgetting everything. I forgot to schedule my boss meetings. I forgot to take care of his schedule. Once, I was planning his business trip and I forgot to book a hotel for him, so he had to spend the night in a cheap, lousy motel at a gas station. And once, I was so clumsy that I almost got my boss killed by pure accident. This is how it happened. I always forgot which side I should put documents in the printer to make copies, and one day when I made a mistake, the paper got jammed. My boss tried to help me and get the jammed paper out. He was pushing the paper so hard that his new black tie got into the shredder. I decided to turn the shredder off, but I missed the button and pushed the start button by mistake. The shredder started to rotate and pulled in his tie. My boss tried to quickly take his tie off, but it all happened so fast that he began choking. His face got red. It could have been catastrophic, but Mike, our office courier, quickly ran to the boss and cut his tie with his office scissors. He literally saved his life then. This incident made my boss furious. He was so mad that he wanted to get me fired immediately. But our head of communications came to my support. She said that I'm the only employee who knows Chinese, and our company was expanding to Chinese market and was about to sign a contract with our Chinese business partner. Therefore, I had to join the team and fly to Beijing for negotiations next week. This was my last chance to keep my work. I felt as if I was back at school. I had to remember everything that I tried so hard to forget just as a bad nightmare dream. I didn't know what to do and felt desperate. So I decided to call a friend of mine who moved from New York to Beijing many years ago. She lived in China for many years and was fairly fluent in Chinese. So I called her and told her my story. She calmed me down and told me everything would be fine. She also offered to help me improve my Chinese before my business trip and negotiations. There wasn't much time left though. I had to take my flight next week. So the day came and I took my flight to Beijing. It was a big and beautiful city. I was so impressed. My friend Kristen met me at the Beijing airport. The weather outside was great, so I left my luggage at her apartment and we decided to go for a walk with Kristen and have a sightseeing tour of the city. We were passing a popular local cafeteria and I got my eyes on a handsome Asian guy who was waiting by the line to get inside. He was so handsome, charismatic and glamorous that I couldn't get my eyes off him. I stared at him for a long time and he noticed it and he looked away. When he bought his cup of coffee, he walked down the street and I followed him. He didn't like it very much. He shouted something to me in Chinese, but I didn't understand anything. So I just smiled and followed him further on. The guy turned around the corner and then I saw him talking to a local policeman and pointing at me. Then the policeman came up to me, said something in Chinese, pushed me against the wall and handcuffed me. I didn't understand anything because I didn't do anything wrong. I shouted to Kristen to come and help me out. She saw I was in danger and she immediately ran to me. I told her about what had just happened and she translated my words to the policeman and the handsome Asian. When the policeman and the handsome guy listened to my friend, they broke into laughter. The policeman brought his excuses and took the handcuffs off me. It turned out that they thought that I was a thief and I wanted to steal from him. The guy introduced himself as Kim and he gave me his business card. Then he said goodbye in Chinese and left. He liked you, Kristen said, and he thinks you're nice and funny. I couldn't sleep that night as I couldn't stop thinking about Kim and his great looks. I was in love with him. Next morning, I sent him a message to his social network account. He replied and soon we became great virtual friends. However, a language barrier was still a problem for us. I didn't know Chinese well enough and he didn't know English, so we communicated using emoji, but it was not always enjoyable. So I decided to put a strong effort and learn Chinese. I studied the language with my friend and was super dedicated, but the results were not that good yet. And then finally, the day came when I had to take part in our business negotiations meeting with our Chinese partner. I knew I would be screwed, but I didn't care. I could only think about my new handsome friend Kim. That morning, Kim wrote to me and he invited me for a date. He said he would wait for me in the same cafeteria where we first met. I was so happy to see him again. So I got my best clothes, put on a perfect makeup, and I ran to the subway to take a quick ride and see my love. When I ran into the subway, I couldn't remember the exact name of the station I had to take. Was it Songjijuang or Huazhuang or Shanggejuang? I was completely lost and I decided just to follow my intuition. As I didn't sleep well that night, I felt tired, so I closed my eyes for 1 minute and all of a sudden, I just fell asleep. And when I opened my eyes, there was a station manager looking at me and patting me on my shoulder, as it was the last subway station and everyone else had already left. I was completely lost. I snatched my purse and when I opened it, my wallet and my phone were all gone. Somebody stole them from me while I was sleeping. So I found myself in a completely unfamiliar place with no money. And I couldn't explain my situation as I couldn't speak the language. I was totally desperate. I looked around and I saw a local old farmer selling his produce near the metro station. I approached him and I tried to talk in Chinese and explained that I need help and I need to call my friend as soon as possible. He seemed quite friendly and he suggested that I can use his phone and stay at his village house for some time. However, when he brought me to his home, it turned out to be a totally wrecked poor old house and his old phone was all broken and didn't work. I stayed there for the whole day and night and I didn't know how to get back home. I didn't remember my friend's address and had no money on me. That night, there was a heavy rain and a thunderstorm. I woke in the middle of the night from the heavy thunderstorm and looked out of the window. It was all dark on the street. I decided to go out of my room just for 1 minute and get a breath of fresh air. But the moment I opened the door, a terrible thing happened. The bright lightning struck the tree just in front of me and a huge tree branch fell right on my head. I felt an excruciating pain and I fainted and lost my consciousness. Next thing I remember is that I woke up in the hospital. My friend Kristen was sitting near my bed and she looked frightened. She was really happy and relieved when I finally opened my eyes. She told me that I was badly hit by a heavy tree branch, and my farmer host found her phone number in my coat pocket and called her. It turned out that I stayed unconscious for almost the whole day, and the doctors were really worried about my medical condition. As the doctors insisted on my bed rest, I couldn't go out and do my work, so I didn't show up for a meeting with our Chinese business partner, and my boss threatened to get me fired. Kristen told me that Kim sent her lots of messages asking why I disappeared. He was really worried about me. I sent him a quick message and told him that I am in a hospital and will recover soon. The doctors put a bandage on my head and told me to have plenty of rest. They said they will let me go home in a couple of days and that I was really lucky I survived. While I was staying in the hospital, I tried to practice my Chinese, so I read all the educational books in Chinese that Kristen brought me. I read them all, from cover to cover. So on the day I finally recovered and was allowed to leave the hospital, I took all my things, ordered a taxi, and I went out. And suddenly, I saw Kim waiting for me near the hospital. Kristen told him that I will leave the hospital and will go home that day. So he came to take care of me and drive me home. I was so happy to see him. I came closer to him and he said how he missed me all these days. He was speaking Chinese and surprisingly, I understood just every word he said. And then I answered him in Chinese and I told him that I was happy to see him too and that I missed him a lot. And while I was talking, he looked astonished. He asked me how I got to learn Chinese so well. I spoke so fluently. And really, how? And when? The only thing I did was to read all the books that Kristen brought me a couple of days ago. So apparently that big tree branch that fell on me that night hit me in a way that changed my ability to remember new things. And now my mind worked so differently. I only needed to read a book once to immediately learn it all by heart. So I really knew Chinese fluently by now. Next day, I called my boss, I told him I fully recovered, and I went to the second meeting with our Chinese business partner. To my great surprise, I saw my great friend Kim right there at this meeting. It turned out that he was our local business partner we had a business with. Since our business trip to China, our global business really took off and was expanding very fast. I got a promotion at work, but it didn't make me happy. I didn't like my job, so I decided to quit. I came back home to US to decide what to do next. I still had my ability. I was absorbing information at an incredible speed. I could learn any language in just one evening. I even learned a couple of ancient dead languages, Latin and Sanskrit, and I became a highest quality top-level translator. Then I switched to science. I went through the entire school science educational program in just 1 week. And after a couple of months, I already studied online at the best top-ranking universities in the world, and I received a total of 4 higher education degrees. By the way, Kim moved with me to the USA, and we got married. And everything was just awesome. I was so happy. However, time went by and our relationship went sour after a while. We had family quarrels now and then. As I had an exceptional memory by now, I remembered all of his mistakes and wrongdoings. I remembered all his words and things he told me. So whenever we would have a family dispute, I would have the final word on it. Now I remember everything in every detail. Ever since I woke up in the hospital, I remember everything that happened to me. I remember all the roads I took, all the people I met, and what the weather was like on every particular day. I remember all the programs on TV and all the movies that I watched from the beginning to the end, with all the details and dialogues. Time passed and I felt that I was no longer in love with my husband. I found him boring and not intellectual enough. He had his good qualities, of course. He was a nice and educated young man with a good technical education. But it seems I just grew my abilities faster than he did, and I became very smart myself. So I grew out of our relationship. We got divorced. Since then, I met other guys and had other boyfriends. They were very smart guys, doctors, scientists, and even a couple Nobel laureates and self-made millionaires from Silicon Valley. But nevertheless, our relationships didn't last long. And at some point, I broke up with all of them. The key problem was that my boyfriends wouldn't tolerate that I was so much smarter than they were. And another problem was that I remembered all of their mistakes and occasional stupid things they did. On the other hand, I was getting very rational and pragmatic. My emotional life wasn't important for me anymore. My boyfriends would complain that I didn't have a unique personality of my own, as if I were just a robot or a voice assistant in a smartphone. It hurts me a lot to hear that, but I told myself that it means nothing and they are not worthy of me. And this is just a jealousy issue. Another problem with my super memory is that I no longer have my creative thinking. I can remember everything in just 1 minute, but I cannot create anything new myself. I can make complex calculations on how to send a rocket to space, but I cannot come up with something really unique. I used to have a great talent for arts and drawing, and now I can't even draw a simple picture. I just get some primitive scribbles. It seems as if I never knew how to draw at all. Sometimes I get out to have a walk in the park during a thunderstorm, and I hope that lightning will strike the tree and the branch will fall on my head again, and things will get back to what it was before. And when I wake up, I will have the same personality back again. This new ability gave me a super memory, but it took away my previous life and my personality. Yes, now I became successful, rich, and popular all over the world thanks to my exceptional memory, but it all came at a cost. What would you choose? To be smart and successful, but on the other hand have no creativity and no emotions? Or have a bad memory, but on the other hand have a great creative talent? Write in the comments what you think about my story, and if you liked it, subscribe to the channel and give it a like.